We are recording.
About to begin. Can everyone hear me? This evening we have 3 projects to discuss, and we will first introduce ourselves. The ADR.
Hi, I'm Laura Dewar.
Mark Fritz.
I'm Joey Buckingham, and I'm actually the chair tonight. I'm the chair tonight because Mark Kruchnick cannot be here, so bear with me if I do anything procedurally not quite right. Okay, and you?
And I'm Steven Sutro.
Great. So now we have the open time for public comments, and it is a limit of 3 minutes per speaker for any items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the online audience?
No, there's no hands raised.
Okay, and now we will go to approval of minutes from our last meeting. Have you all had the chance to read them?
I mentioned that it wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah, I read them. I did have something I'd like to make a note on, though, so I'm going to bring them up real quickly, and then I'll be able to make that comment.
I also have a correction.
Maybe you could go first if yours is.
Okay, so my correction is on the project at 21 Loma Linda, and it said for Joey Buckingham that nobody can see the project since it's on a hillside. That was not exactly what I meant or what I said. It was because it's behind a house and a hillside backs up to it. It's not necessarily a hillside lot ordinance project. It was because nobody can see the things that they are proposing to do, the fireplace, et cetera. So I just wanted to make that clear so it didn't come back in a later project. Right.
My note, if I could make an adjustment to the project D230 Wellington. I think there's a comment, the last bullet point under my notes, I did say the house was still too large. What I had summarized was I could understand that building up to the existing square footage plus a 1-car garage, and I don't think that got noted. So I was looking at the existing square footage that's on the lot, plus 200 square feet for an additional parking space, covered parking space. So it just erroneously measures that it would just be at the existing square footage. So I was looking at existing plus 200 square feet. And that was the only correction. Yeah, that's why I wanted to make sure that was clarified. And I felt like that was appropriate for the variance to exceed the FAR.
So with those things mentioned, do I have a motion to approve?
Yeah, I can motion to approve them.
I second.
Yep.
Okay, so approved. So the first project is, hold on just a second, everyone. First project that we are looking at are the bridges up at Natalie Coffin Green Park. And the town planner will present that project, and then we will take it from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Town of Ross Advisory Design Review Group. Rich Simonich, Public Works Director on behalf of the Town of Ross, who is the applicant tonight. Applicant requests a recommendation from Advisory Design Review to the Town Council for a design review project where the town is proposing to construct, replace, we've already removed the old bridges. We're going to replace them, the proposed project, with 3 new prefabricated steel truss bridges. A little bit of background on the project, and the internet's kind of slow, so there might be a little bit of lag here as I try to go through my presentation. So we believe that the bridges were built around the same time as the Three Bear Hut because of the similarities with the rock abutments on the bridges, and you can kind of see on the slide here. This is the second bridge. Three Bear Hut is to the left, and then a small picnic area to the right. You see these the rock formations. That's very similar to what they have on the Three Bear Hut, and we plan to retain these abutments and fit these new prefabricated bridges on these historical abutments to retain the the current look and feel of the park as much as we can. So, yeah, so they were probably built in the 30s and 40s. I think they've always been wood construction, probably replaced every 20 years through, your basic weathering and rotting. You can see on this bridge, I believe this one was actually, they put new girders in the 80s, and it's already sagging at the center. So which is basically a failing condition. So that's one of the reasons why we removed them. And there's several other aspects of the bridge, including the railings, that were basically unsafe. So here's a little, just to get you oriented if you're not familiar with the park, but I have no reason to believe that any of you are not familiar. So here's the parking lot as you come to the end of the road at Natalie Coffin Green Park. And the three bridges it's the three smaller bridges. We're doing the large bridge that goes up the access road to Phoenix Lake. That's MMWD. We're not doing anything with that. It's the three pedestrian bridges. The first one crosses over to the Three Bear Hut picnic area. The second one is the one we just looked at right here. And then the third one is a smaller bridge that comes over into this last smaller picnic area down at the bottom of the slope. And the main access road to Phoenix Lake runs up in this area. So this is just kind of what the first bridge looks like. You can see that this is one of the larger bridges, and how the span, it's really not that much of a span. It's maybe 20 feet long. I mean, we have all the specs, I just don't have it off the top of my head. But so because the spans are so short, we're kind of limited on the product that we can select for the prefabricated bridges, but they're hopefully you'll like what they do have to offer here. And this is just looking at that last bridge, Bridge 3, and all that annotation is from a grant application that I did to get money for this project, but we were unsuccessful in getting that. It was kind of similar to the Rails to Trails type grant that we applied for, really onerous application, but they still said no. I tried to sell the point that it is kind of a gateway to, in some ways, to Muir Woods and the coast and all that. They didn't buy it, so we didn't get that one. So this is kind of the product that we're looking at, and this is the type of bridge that we would be going with. It's kind of the weathered steel that comes, right fabricated. They'll deliver it to us looking like this, and this is a style you've seen with steel statues and things like that. We felt it was the most applicable, again, to the look and feel of the park. There are other choices they're basically, you would have the nice painted or chromium or other colored painted steel types, but we felt this would be the best for the park as far as the steel structure. But we do have a choice in the decking and the railing, and so we can go with the natural wood planking provided by the bridge fabricator. And the planks might need replacement every 10, 15 years, however it goes. They are easy to replace. Town staff would very easily be able to do that, and we felt that would be the best choice here. The other choice is you can get a concrete deck. You can get a steel grate. You can't really see this too well. And then the other one is a fiber reinforced plastic, which would be the best maintenance choice, but I don't think it would fit as well as the wood decking. So we're gonna propose to run with that. And similar picture, but now we're looking at the railing choices. So we'd also like to stick with the natural wood railing and a kind of a wooden, they call it a rub rail, I guess is what it's called along here. And then we can kind of specify a custom top rail that goes over the steel rail, or we can just leave it as steel. But we kind of like this style. This was provided by our consultants who have done these bridges before. I think this is in Marin County. It's definitely a Bay Area bridge, pedestrian bridge, but that's kind of what we want to go with for the materials, for the structure, the decking and the railing. And then we also have the, once the bridges are in, we do have the approach railings that we want to reinstall. And there are some choices that we could go with, but staff prefers to stick with the hog rail type fencing as the handrail and the approach to the bridge. And there's not going to be that much of that. They're pretty short pieces. Another choice could be the split rail, or we also, you could go back to what was there now. It's just this picket type railing, but staff feels that the hog wire fence would be a better match to what's up there now and would retain the rustic feel of the park. So that concludes my presentation for this project, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Does the ADR have any questions?
Yeah, just could we flip back to the handrails real quickly?
Yeah.
Your selection on the wood. I wasn't certain what you're showing there in that photo. That top rail, is that wood or is that the steel? I apologize.
That's a wood
That's a wood
plank on
cap.
top of the steel.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And I didn't go over the other options that they have. They do have, on the top left here, you've got your basic steel rail type handrail.
Yeah.
And then, there's cabling, and then there's these top rails up there. None of those really grabbed staff's attention as much as keeping with the wooden rustic look.
Right. And then the approach handrails, the ones that are at bridge number 1, they're the hog wire one that you pointed out, and the split rail that kind of leads up to the hog wire. Are all those remaining, or will that hog wire and rail and split rail remain as it is today?
Yeah, so that's that zone between the bridge and the Three Bear Hut. That's going to stay there. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's why we kind of like to match that hog wires leading up to that first bridge. So
Right. So bridge 2 and 3 would have something similar, just the hog
Yeah.
wire portion, not the split rail leading to the hog wire, because you don't need it.
no,
to
it'd
that
just
extent,
be
right?
probably 6 to 8 foot maximum length of hog wire fence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions. So the stone abutment will remain on all the bridges, and then the steel structure would just be laid over that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that's one question. And then the steel itself, that finish that looks a little orangey, do we have choices on that? Could we have something that's maybe more like a kind of an oil rub bronze, or something that's a little darker?
There may be with other bridge manufacturers, and this brings up a good point, is that we can only provide for the bid purposes a spec, a performance spec. This is what we want. We need you to match it, as good or better. I kind of like the idea of kind of the rub bronze. That might be something we can consider. I don't, the Contact, this particular bridge doesn't really have that. They just have you either go with this, or you get you get the chromium or the different painted styles.
And I think that the Corten is pre-weathering kind of thing that will arrest itself at a certain weathered point. If a bronze color is not available in steel other than galvanizing and then painting, I think, right? Because other options would be a galvalume or kind of like a galvanized kind of stuff.
Yeah,
or
like a powder
painted
coating
finish,
or that
or a
sort of
powder
thing,
coated finish.
galvanized,
So I think
yeah.
if a dark bronze is the desire, then I think it's a paint.
It's a paint.
I think so. I think there's no kind of like self-protective weathering kind of surface
Right.
that is a bronze color. I think the Corten is it.
So the orange color would never go away? It would never mellow out?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, I think it gets even more and more. I've seen these types of statues, and year after year, you get darker stains here, and some parts stay light. It starts to look even more weathered, but, of course, it's maintaining its structural integrity throughout it all.
One more question. Did you ever look at just rebuilding the bridge out of wood and not having a metal bridge?
Good question. So that's what we've been doing throughout history, I guess, town staff, without having the proper stream bank alteration permits or anything like that, just went ahead and, they just kept building these wood bridges that needed constant repair. So, we're trying to get out of that deferred maintenance routine that we've been in for the past 50 years and get these things more of a permanent type structure.
Understood. Any other?
Rich, there's the picture with the wood railing on top and the rub rail. And that one might be core 10 as well, right? I think that's a rusted core 10, which is much mellower looking, right, than the orange.
It does look that way.
I think that's the same finish. It appears differently. So I think it's brighter when it arrives and it does get darker. I don't think it stays as bright orange, But that's quite a bit more mellow.
This
right?
one looks like it's been in this big picture here looks like it's been in there for a few years, really. But the same weathered steel is down here too, and it looks a little bit more mellow. So this definitely looks like they built that bridge quite a few years ago. So that's kind of the different types of color you'll see eventually on this weathered steel.
Is it something you would get a sample for? Because like in that picture, it looks like it could also be part, like the lighting in the picture,
I can try for the design review portion of this. I don't know if they can send a piece of steel, but I can definitely try. I don't see why they wouldn't, so, yeah.
Maybe they could actually point us to a local area, one they've done, because there are 2 or 3 of these in the area. I know I've walked across them myself. I just can't recall whether they're on
There's one in
Lagunitas or.
San Rafael that I think crosses over part of in the marina area.
That could be.
I'm not sure
yeah.
they use this type of finish, though.
Maybe I know you can't, in the spec, delineate who's going to build it, but whoever ends up submitting the sample, you may be able to say, hey, have you done something in the local area that people could look at?
Yeah.
Yeah, not sure.
Yeah, it's kind of tough with the public bidding aspect of it.
Right.
We can't tell them you need to use Contact. They can use Bridge Brothers or the other Continental Bridges and things like that, so.
Now we open it up to the public for public comment, and each person may speak for 3 minutes, no more. Any comments?
You have to turn the little switch on your microphone.
Elizabeth Robbins, Town Council. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for a council member to comment at this point, but I just wanted to make one quick comment. I think it's really important that the bridge be very pretty and very rustic. It's the town's park. There's that rustic sign that says Natalie Coffin Green Park. We spent $200,000 to rebuild Three Bear Hut, and that's very rustic. And the bridge is right next to the gray boulder with the plaque that celebrates that we just bought Bald Hill and turned it into open space. So that orange thing almost looks like the Golden Gate Bridge, and I hope that there's a way of having a pretty and rustic bridge. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments online? Do we have any?
Stop share. Whoops. Did that do it? Yeah, no one online has any questions.
Okay, so we are going to bring it back to the ADR for discussion and recommendations to the town council. Who wants to go first?
I like the staff recommendations completely. I like the wood walking surface. I like the wood rail and the wood rub rail. I think the photo of the Core 10 is handsome in the example that shows the rub rail. And so it would be interesting to get a sample of the Core 10 or know what happens to it over time. And if it darkens like that, that would be great. If it gets more orange and more intense, I don't know, that gives me pause. But I think it gets more dark over time is my experience, so I think it should be okay. But I like all the suggestions. I like the split rail and the hog wire both, and so for instances where there's not fall protection required by code, maybe we do the split rail or something, or if you're gonna use a mix of solutions, I would default, they're both great looking, but I would default more to the split rail just because it's more country and more relaxed, if there's a choice. But I like all of the suggestions. I think it's a great job and great selection.
Yeah, I concur with Stephen. I think it does darken. Also, that one photograph makes it almost look like it's in the bright sunlight, like almost setting sun. All these bridges are in the kind of a dark environment, right, beneath the trees. So I don't think you're going to get that shot of light on it very often. I think I like the wood pathway, the surface as well. I think my one suggestion would be, if we can ensure that the components for the top rail specifically are of substantial thickness, that'll, not something that's like a one by. I would say, this should have some substantial, depth to it, so that it kind of marries a little closer with what we see in the Three Bear Hut. So maybe it's a 2 by. I mean, that's right. They have some substantial like the framing of the hog wire approaches are pretty substantial. Like some of them are 6 bys and some are at least 4 bys.
Yeah.
So looking to see if you carry that dimensions through the top cap and maybe the end post. Maybe not on the rub rail, because I have a feeling there's a limitation on that. But just to give it some more rustic character that Elizabeth was speaking to, I think it'd be really nice. And I'm with Stephen on the approach rails. Fewer is better, so the split rail is fine. If you have to go for something more fall protection, go for the hog wire. And match the details you have out there already. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. I think, it makes sense to get something that requires less maintenance, and definitely trying to keep it as attractive as possible and rustic, and kind of match and tie into the existing materials there and the existing hog wire and split rail. And I think, so I agree with all the decisions. The one thing I would say is maybe just a finished sample for the Core 10 would be helpful before those get purchased and built. Thanks.
So I'll wrap it up. I also agree with the other ADR members that this, what is shown in attachment 3 would be very nice. I'm pretty worried about that orange picture, and I don't think we can rely on, I think it will look good, because this is such an important part of our town. I think that the imagery we should be thinking about is kind of like national parks, quaint bridges, that sort of look. So I think it's really important we get the samples and we don't move ahead. We want to see the Core 10 samples, and we want to see anything that might be a bronze alternative. And I would love it if it just came back to us, because that's a really expensive mistake if it gets up there and it's orange and it never stops being orange. But otherwise, I agree with everybody else. And when there's a choice between hog wire and split rail, I would go with the split rail unless there's a faulting issue.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think I would, for design review to council, I will have some samples to show. Is that kind of where you're headed? Okay, yeah.
Just to make sure before we actually build it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, or I think you're not going to be able to get the samples until you pick the contractor, correct? I'm just saying before it gets built, right?
I can get a sample of that material, whether that's exactly what comes up or not.
Or if we could go tour, if we could go look at a bridge that's just like that.
Yeah, let me
has
see.
a couple years on
I think
it.
there are a few of them around here. I think The one example, though, I think, I don't know if it's in Marin or not, but we'll try to find some.
But to avoid putting it on the agenda of another ADR meeting, it could be that the sample is shown to anybody here, right? Or to you if you're particularly interested, that would be great. So Rich could call you and say, hey, I have a bridge for you to see, or I have a sample for you to see, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to come back to ADR.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, the next project is 12 Canyon Road, and we would love for the town planner to present this project.
Good evening, ADR members. Let me pull up the PowerPoint. Give me a second. Good evening, ADR members. Tonight, the applicant and homeowner at 12 Canyon Road is requesting a recommendation to the town council for design review and a hillside lot permit. This is the existing project here. The project is proposing to construct a 60 by 30 feet sports court on a raised wooden platform adjacent to the existing pool deck. The sport court will be located 45 feet from the side yard setback and 93 feet from the rear yard setback, in compliance with the zoning regulations for the R1 B5 zoning district. The sport court will be a concrete surface and will have a 6-foot solid wood fence. The area beneath the court will remain a natural garden, and all lighting will be low voltage and downward shielded. Staff requests that the ADR group discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the town council. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Roberta, were you going to say a few words about what the town had to say about sport courts and pickleball courts?
Sure. So during the September 12th and then also during the October 11th town council meetings, the town council did discuss pickleball courts specifically. Their guidance to the ADR, because you are reviewing 2 sports courts this evening, is that there would be a condition of approval that states that these 2 sports courts would be subject to any regulations related to pickleball. During the October 12th town council meeting, some of those possible regulations could either be keeping the municipal code as is and not regulating pickleball courts. It could be a distance requirement from the property lines. It could be that pickleball courts would not be allowed in residential or private property. And then it could also be that a pickleball court would be a use permit type classification that would require any of the sports courts being approved to Bellagio, 12 Canyon, and 160 Lagunitas. If there are regulations that it's a use permit, those applicants would return and apply for a use permit. Likely that would require noise mitigation, whether it's with a barrier, through equipment, possible hours, those types of conditions. So I do want to clarify that for tonight, the ADR is reviewing these as sports courts, not as pickleball courts.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. Does the ADR have any questions of the applicant before we? Oh, I thought, okay, but please, sorry. I thought Alex presented. Could the applicant please present the project?
Brad, can you hear us? Brad?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for hearing our project here. I just want to go through a quick history on this. We started this about a year ago, and since that time, there's been quite a lot of discussion about sports courts and pickleball courts, especially in the town of Ross. Um, so I know that there's, it's kind of a little bit of an influx process with this, but we've done our best um, to follow all the rules and all the guidelines and the recommendations from the staff when we started this project. Um, we did explore some different areas on the site. We explored the hillside above the driveway, and that was just way too steep. And the hillside between Winding Way and the property, and that was also way too steep. We also had an iteration where we had this sport court uh, perpendicular to the swimming pool, and that encroached into the setback. So we ended up getting into the design that you're seeing today. Some of the merits of this plan that I think are very important are that we are trying to maintain the natural setting. So this whole court area is built on a structure, and the goal is to keep the very natural existing conditions that you see on the site today. So I did a project in San Anselmo a few years ago. It's almost exactly the same as this, and it really turned out amazing. So I have a lot of confidence in the feasibility of this project. That project was built on steel supports with a concrete sport court and then some artificial turf areas. So it's actually very similar. The project in San Anselmo is actually a little taller above grade. Um, we have talked to neighbors, and early on back in December, we had talked to 10 Canyon, and they had suggested that we get a sound acoustic engineer involved, and we did. So we hired Charles Salter, and I believe Ben Piper from Charles Salter is on this Zoom and can answer any questions about decibels and about setbacks and perhaps soft equipments. But what we did on this is he suggested that we needed to meet the town code requirements, that we needed a 30-inch tall solid sound barrier along the outer part of the deck of the court. We are proposing a 6-foot solid wood fence. We had a discussion yesterday with the sound person that wood fence could also be like a tempered glass or a plexiglass, and it would also mitigate the sound aspect of this as well. So that's an option. And I want to emphasize that the goal of this was that we don't have a bulk and mass issue with this project, that we're trying to keep this as a natural setting as possible. And I'm maintaining all the redwood trees, all the vegetation, and really trying to have this vanish within the space. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to be out on the site and go look at the story poles. But from the property lines and you really can't see this at all from any property other than maybe a little bit from 10 Canyon. And 10 Canyon, the house on 10 Canyon is a pretty long way away from the sport court. And the closest thing that gets near the property line over there is a pathway that actually leads to a sport court. And it appears that the sport court on 10 Canyon maybe hasn't been in use for a long time, but it certainly is, it looks on Marin maps to be about maybe 15 feet from the property line. And if this house ever gets sold or anything happens, there's a good chance that sport court will be revamped and reused. So, part of this real big effort on this was also to adhere to that 45-foot setback. And so we've really done a lot of work on reducing bulk and mass and making sure that we're not asking for a variance for this project. I think that that's most of what I have to say here. I'm super happy to answer any questions, and we're also open to any feedback that you might have and appreciate your time on this.
Thanks, Brad. Do any of you have questions? Any of the ADR members have questions of Brad?
Hey, Brad, you said you're maintaining all the redwoods and trees. There is one tree, I think it might be a bay that's kind of on I'm going to say the northern side, the western side maybe, northwest side, that looks like it's within the scope of the court itself, not just the decking. Because I see two redwoods sort of in the deck on one side, if I'm reading the plans correctly.
Yeah.
Is there an additional sort of maybe a 10-inch, 12-inch diameter tree that's being taken out that's adjacent to this?
Yeah, there's a tree that's up. I mean, there's some ratty old trees in here, but there's one that's up by where the rebound wall is up on that hillside. There's one there, and then there's a buckeye, or it's a horse chestnut tree kind of in the middle of the court that actually I noticed today. I went out there today to look at the story poles, and it was covered by some text on the survey. So that's kind of in the center of the court, but it's I think it was an 18-inch horse chestnut. It's not a native. It's an ornamental tree that's in there. But there's a tree on the uphill side over by, there's an arrow to it. It's getting cut off on this, but it's it's kind of a scraggly bay tree up there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I might be thinking of a different tree. It's on the opposite side than the rebound wall, but I could be
Oh
wrong.
yeah, that's a horse chestnut.
Okay,
Yeah, and I noticed that today. But we're keeping, there's two redwoods. The text kind of blurs the one that's kind of close to the court. And then another redwood that's within the raised planters that are there now that we need to kind of rebuild those and revamp the bottom part of them that are falling apart. And then, but that's part of this is like to really beef up the screening between the fence and the court itself. And there's quite a few large redwoods down in that space as well that we're going to maintain. We're going to remove the bridge, remove the pathways. There's a zip line across this area that's going to come out. And there's an old couch down there. There's a bunch of old materials that this area just really, I think it's used by kids a little bit, but it's certainly underutilized for this project site.
one other question, Brad, if you could. Can you talk a little bit about how you determined the height of this particular sport court versus the height of the existing deck or the height of the base of the canyon?
Well, there's a couple things. If you noticed below the pool, there's a door that goes into the deck that goes to the pool equipment. So I used that door to set the height, and then I didn't want to remove any of the wall that's below the pool. So there's like at least a 10-foot tall retaining wall below the pool. And so I have my structure going kind of right over top of that retaining wall. And I just thought it was it's in that drawing right there. See the existing walls? It's kind of this triple stack old wall that I wanted the decking to be above that. And then I didn't want to lower it anymore because on the uphill side, I started to get into a taller wall. So on the uphill where the rebound wall is, that rebound wall basically has to be 6 feet tall. I could maybe lower it a little bit, but thought it would be a really good wall to have as a return wall. And if I lowered the deck, then all of a sudden that wall would get taller. So, this is squeezing this court into, I mean, it fit actually surprisingly well. But lowering the court, I could maybe lower it a little bit, but not a whole lot. And I could maybe push the court a little bit towards the pool, but not a lot either. I could maybe push it a couple feet because I have to get the stairs to work from the pool down to down to the court surface. So I need X number of risers and, there's an elevation drop there.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification.
Just to kind of follow up on that, where is the 6-foot rebound wall that you're talking about?
That is on I'm looking which way is north here. It's on the side of the court, away from the driveway, if that makes sense. If you're looking at the court, there's a wall on the right side. If you're looking at this drawing, there's a basketball hoop. Well, there's a basketball hoop on both
Okay.
sides, I guess, but
Thank you. Can you pull up the section with that?
it doesn't show it on that. There's an elevation that I did
Okay.
kind of last minute that staff asked me to create an elevation of the rebound wall. Well, I just did this the other day, but I don't know if staff has this or not.
I do.
I have a-
I can pull it up right now, just the computer's a little slow.
And that wall is holding the hillside, and then there's stairs that are bisecting that wall that go up to the existing pool area.
I have a question, Brad. It's Joey. If you were to move the entire court in front of the retaining wall for the pool and push it down in elevation, maybe even lose the side deck that is down the canyon, would you still meet the setbacks? The question is, how much could you push it down and still make it work?
How much could I push it lower in
Push
elevation?
it lower and not use that retaining wall for the pool as your reason for being there. Just go in front of it.
Yeah, the door into this pool equipment has some impact on that too.
Just push it
But I
down.
could maybe put a landing there and have a couple steps up to that door. I think I could maybe lower it a foot or maybe 18 inches or so. I'd have to really look at the survey because there's also the redwood tree on the other side that I was really trying to not take out any of these redwood trees down here. So by the hoop on the left side, there's a big redwood tree right there. It's not super big. What is it? It's a 24-inch redwood. But I'd have to really look. And so if that was a desire to see if I could lower it, I just need to look and see if I can do it.
Okay, just was curious about that. If we just ignored that one constraint and put it in front of that and pushed it down.
Yeah,
But when I did this, I used that 45-foot setback as my guide to just adhere to the 45-foot.
Right, but you have the wood deck on the
Mhm.
downhill side
Yeah.
that maybe, I don't know. I'm just asking.
Some of the goal of the wood deck was to provide a little bit of a buffer so balls don't bounce off and, balls don't end up down there all the time. So, but it could be looked at. I thought of this a little bit today. Could I push it towards the pool a little bit and maybe reduce the deck a little bit? And, we're totally open to talking about some compromises, and this is just, we're trying to get started here.
One other question, the 6-foot fence that you were talking about, it's an acoustic fence. Is there a certain assembly? I think I saw an assembly described.
Yeah, it's basically overlapping boards, so there's not any gap in the boards. So it's actually got it's got boards that are shiplapped. And then, that's fine, but after talking yesterday with the sound guy, I thought maybe having this be more glass, because in the beginning of this, I really wanted this to just kind of float in here and be as green as possible and be as transparent as possible. So when you're here and when you're looking at it from a distance, it still feels like a natural setting. So be totally open to, and he said that, yeah, like a tempered glass barrier could work, or even a plexiglass, like a thicker plexiglass that would be framed in some kind of a wood structure could work as well.
Is there such a thing as a sound-rated plexi or glass material?
Yeah, he said that, he said as long as it's solid, he said that he's might be online, but as long as there's no gap. So it would be sandwiched between like 6x6 posts with, stops or notched in or something like that. It just wouldn't have any gaps in it. And
Okay.
he did a whole design on this based on raw um, sound code. I don't know exactly what you call it, but acoustic codes for Ross. And Charles
Yeah.
Salter, they've been around forever, and he's extremely knowledgeable about this.
Yep, I saw the report. Thank you. Do any of you have any other questions of Brad?
I have one additional question, Brad, which is what provides the lateral stability or the seismic resistive in the sideways direction underneath? There would be cross wires or diagonal struts or something underneath, presumably?
Well, what we did on this other project that was it was 20 feet off the ground, and it was like 6x6 tubular steel that was on grade beams and piers. And then I believe, I'd have to look at this again, but I believe then there was cabling, that cross cabling that went through with like turnbuckles that you could tighten everything down. I mean, obviously this is going to be structurally engineered for building permit, but it's a tubular steel structure that tries to keep as lightweight as possible. We'd paint it, paint it like a flat black, which we could also do with the posts of the railing. We could really, whenever we're trying to get something to disappear, we paint it flat black and then plant all around it and have it go away. The interesting thing on the San Anselmo project as well is the fire department loved the project. I was shocked when they reviewed the project. They thought it was the greatest fire suppression concept that they'd seen, and they were so highly supportive of it. So I don't know if that's any consideration on this project, but I thought I'd throw that in there as well.
Still have one more question.
go ahead.
You have another question?
I just had a question. It's increasing the impervious surface by 1,800 square feet. Like only the concrete, the decking is pervious, right?
Yeah, that's my goal on the decking. I wanted it to be pervious. I mean, there might be, I've got to think about this in terms of sound a little bit, but I want all the decking to be pervious, and also to have, I mean, part of the idea on the decking is the natural setting, but most importantly, it was that I could have the redwoods kind of rise up through the decking and have it feel like, the redwoods are part of the court. But yeah, so we would have civil engineering and do bioretention as necessary. And we would adhere to all the codes about the impervious surface.
Sure.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brad. I'm opening it up to public comment. Each person gets 3 minutes. Is there anyone who'd like to say anything about this? Oh.
Good evening. I'm Zara, and this is Dennis Murin. We're neighbours directly south of 12 Canyon. And a point in clarification, we have an ancient tennis court on our property that we bought with the property in '96. We played on it for a few years, but when it needed resurfacing, and we'd heard by then from our neighbours, the sound reverberates in the canyon. We decided not to, and it's going back to nature. We haven't played in almost 20 years. I was a landscape architect. I have a deep appreciation of the Canyon neighborhood in which we live, both from the perspective of a resident and professionally. The applicant and his landscape architect have tried to make a sports court fit the proposed site, but this natural spring and drainage swale that flows through our property through the year, still now, should be protected rather than developed, as set out in the Hillside Lot Ordinance. Building a structure that's beefy enough to carry the sports court 16 feet up in the air will seriously disrupt the riparian setting. And from that height, the noise will broadcast really loudly. It is almost 4 times as loud as tennis, very high, annoying pitch and fast repetition. And the vast deck would overshadow the space below. And it would stay dead and dark. In respect, I do disagree with the landscape architect here. It's certainly not going to meet the applicant's claim that the area beneath the court will remain a natural garden. It's going to be in total darkness under the concrete sports court and deck, which together make up 77 feet by 53 feet. The findings cannot be made for this application, not for design review. In 1841-100, we see development should preserve lands that are unique environmental resources. So here is part of our watershed. Not for the Hillside Lot Ordinance on a number of grounds. A particular one, residences and accessory structures shall not traverse, encroach, or impede a natural watercourse or drainage swale. We're deeply concerned about the impact of noise from the court. The council has struggled over 2 meetings to move forward on restrictions for pickleball, and as we saw it, the majority was leaning toward prohibiting the development of courts within 250 feet of residential property lines. Oh, can I just quickly finish up? Here we are 5 days later, faced with a proposal that would subject us to noise of pickleball played at just 45 feet from our property. Please consider an alternative site.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Design Review, Matthew Salter from Town Council. First of all, thank you so much for what you guys do. We could, if we had to go through all of this and the council meetings would never end. So I really, really appreciate you taking so much time. As Councilmember Robbins mentioned, we've been struggling with this issue on the council, and I view you as an extension of us to try to work through these issues, which are real between the neighbors and the noise. So this project's very interesting to us because they had a sound study conducted. And so one of the things we're wrestling with is whether to have for all these potential pickleball courts or louder courts to require a sound study. So unfortunately, I don't know that we can question only I think you guys can question the applicant, but it'd be helpful to us to understand how much it cost, how much time it took to do this, and whether this 4 hours that they used of playtime was sort of that, they said that's a conservative estimate. We're trying to figure out if we would have a sort of baseline for sort of hours for these tests. So I don't know if there's still questions you could ask, or maybe if the applicant is willing to talk to some of us on council to suss this out, or you as well, because we'd love to come with a comprehensive approach where everyone feels heard, the neighbors feel heard, and we've set some standards that everyone can live with. So we're still wrestling with this. By the way, the video is up from the last council meeting, and I encourage you all to look at it just so you can understand where we're at. I don't think there's any consensus at this point, other than on the existing stuff where the council's very clear that that's all okay, but it's really trying to figure out these new projects. How do we go forward and come up with some rules, at least, that everyone can live with, that don't hamper or cost too much or take too much of your time as well. So your input's really helpful as well. Thank you.
Matthew. I do need to remind all of us that this is a sport court. It is not being called a pickleball court, and we are proceeding as if it's a sport court. There are many sport courts in Ross that are built and they conform to all of the requirements, the setbacks, et cetera. So we're not adjudicating about pickleball tonight. The town's going to do that later. So this is really about the location of a sport court, and it could be quite a few different sports. Just wanted. Are there any other public comments?
There is no one online.
No more? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to ADR to discuss and make a recommendation to the town council. Who would like to go first?
So I went to the site today before our meeting and was reviewing this and was pretty shocked with how, once I went down to the bottom, how tall it looked. I guess it's 16 feet above grade for the decking, and then the fence on top of that. But I also realized, like, nobody is going to have that perspective ever, except, I mean, as far as I could tell, except the property owner. Perhaps I am wrong, so I see somebody laughing. But it's not encroaching into the setback. So if we're talking about the design of the thing, not whether it should exist, I would think a few comments. I don't know what the lighting is, but definitely just like basic low lighting, nothing where people would be playing sports into the evening. I think adding sound barriers is a smart idea, and kind of working with the town on whatever these regulations end up being. And then I do think making efforts to lower that decking would definitely help, because the section is really nice and green and lush, but having seen other properties with decks like that, it's always kind of gross underneath them. So yeah, I would say try to lower it. That's everything from me. So thank you.
I'll go next. When I saw the drawings and before I went up there, I was, in my mind, there's no way this should not exist. It's up too high, it's hillside lot, and I just felt very negatively about it until I drove up there this afternoon. And when I saw the site, I kind of changed my mind, because it doesn't really scream out to me hillside lot, it screams canyon lot. And this is set down in a canyon. That said, I feel that it is sitting up way too high, and it could be pushed down quite a bit and still achieve what the owners would like, and that is a sport court. So, Brad, that's why I asked all those questions. I feel like if you could really push this down, and if you could make the leading edge of it not a 6-foot solid wood fence, but some sort of a clear, acoustically rated material, I think it really is the best place for that, and it's well within the owner's rights. It's out of the setbacks, and I could support the project if it just came way down. They did their homework. They got the acoustic, the sound engineer. They've really researched it, and it seems to me the smartest place. It's much better than having it up on the hill where the sound would travel, and it is their right to have this amenity on their large piece of land.
Yeah, I think I may have a contrarian view on that one. I think that the challenge I have with this is not necessarily the view from neighbors, right? Because I don't think it can really be perceived. I've wandered around the site pretty extensively. I don't think you can really see this, and it is in a spot that's relatively unique. I think the part that I have a problem with is, should it really exist at all? Like, this is spanning a canyon on 3 sides, doing some level of structural gymnastics to make sure this doesn't fall down. I don't have any confidence that anything beneath this solid concrete deck will grow. So I think you're really, when we look at the design guidelines, we look at our hillside lot ordinances, we talk about appropriate development, we talk about grading and landscaping and maintaining vegetation and waterways. This seems to me to fly in the face of all of that. It's while I don't disagree, it fits within the setbacks, and it has some level of design that's doing the best it can. It seems like a square peg in a round hole to me. If you look up the canyon, it is like the home itself has already started. It starts at the top of that canyon, and the pool sort of begins that canyon. I feel like extending that with the wooden decks on all sides is a bridge too far, no pun intended. But I think it just flies in the face of our design guidelines about what we look at a hillside lot. This is wildly different than some of the other examples we have in town, which are on relatively flat lots. And I think that deck extension, the height of it, all of it makes an impact that is unnecessary in this particular hillside lot. If this was to move forward, I would say some of your suggestions, Joey, dropping it not 1.5 feet, 5, 6 feet to minimize the amount. I would pull it in on all sides. I would probably remove the deck to the south to minimize this in a way that it makes as limited of an impact on that canyon as possible. But my first and foremost statement is it doesn't feel right there. It just, to me, when I went out to the site, I thought, whoa, that is, to your point, Laura, it's enormous. It's flying 16 feet above, so we're above 20 plus feet. That doesn't seem like we're following our own design guidelines for hillside lots. I also tend to agree, there are not many other spots on this other than the flat lawn that exists on the northern side of the pool that could exist to have a sports court. That spot is kind of naturally already there. It's already flattened. Maybe that's another spot that outdoor sport activities could be utilized in that area. So that's my thought. It just doesn't fit in this particular site.
I think I'm in between the two of you. I feel like if the sound ordinance is met, just like putting that aside, assuming that you can achieve the 55 decibels at the property lines, that there's no problem with that kind of activity within the buildable area of the lot. But it feels as designed just a little too big, a little unnatural. And I'm kind of reading the design guidelines about guidance for how we should treat retaining walls, cut and fill, basically. And so this results in a really tall cut with a retaining wall of 6 feet on that side, and then it launches out at 16 plus 6 or whatever, really tall. So my kind of gut is to push it down by 4 or 5 feet as well. But if you push it down by 4 or 5 feet, we can't end up with a retaining wall that's 15 feet tall, or not 15, sorry, 11 feet tall. That would be kind of an unnatural swipe in the landscape too. So I think that I can support it in this location if some changes are made in its kind of respect for the topography. And I think that's kind of your gut is about kind of respect for the topography, Mark. So I think I could support it with some changes, but I don't think it's like a 1 foot reduction is where I would land with that. And then I'm uncomfortable. I know no one really sees it. Maybe you do a little bit. I'd love to see a photograph from your perspective, from the neighbor's perspective, that kind of shows how much they see, if that's true. I can't see that they do or not. I can't conclude necessarily, but I'm uncomfortable about the view underneath it. Maybe if no one sees it, it's okay, but it makes me feel queasy that it wouldn't have kind of some tapered planting walls or some metal screen that's stepped, or somehow the underside of that is gross, kind of I'm picturing the cables and the concrete and the beams, and it's all just kind of feels unnaturally thrust out into the landscape.
But isn't the point that it's supposed to be kind of a
Floaty?
flow-through? Like a flow-through that you just leave the repair,
But it's not, yes,
It's,
okay.
it's nothing now.
But it's a concrete deck with a 6-foot solid wood wall. That doesn't speak to a kind of floaty
I'm thinking
thrust.
it's on piers.
Yeah.
It's enclosed on three sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's no flow through anything, right?
It's a box up in the air then,
with a cave.
with a vacancy
cave.
underneath.
That's the part, I think if this was truly open air on three sides underneath, I might have a slightly different feeling about that underside. But right now, it's enclosed on three sides, and that to me, because it spans across the canyon.
And in section, it kind of almost touches down on the one side, which is quite nice. It just
does.
happens to be there's so much topography change that it goes gnarly floating out on the other side.
That's
So-
right. I think the respect of the topography, to me, these things are at odds. You have a canyon and you're trying to put whatever, 50 by 70 rectangular flat surface in a canyon. This is the only way to do it that would make any sense. But does it make any sense at all to have this giant flat? They're not going to excavate and dig down like we see often. They're just going to float it above.
So we have to summarize some recommendations for the applicant. And so do we say, can you conceive of any modifications to the design in which you could support it, Mark?
I don't think that, I think, no. Because the problem being, as soon as you start pushing it down 5 feet to your point, Joey's point, and to Brad's point, now you're excavating on the sides of the canyon, right? Because the dimensions of this are somewhat fixed. So the more you push it down, the more now you're creating solid walls and retaining walls on the sides, and including the pool walls kind of already there. So again, sort of square peg in a round hole, this canyon isn't a rectangle, it's a V. So you're putting something in and then you're shoving it down further, but now you're creating a cut and fill problem.
But,
So I really don't see that as a solution.
but could it be considered if you push it down and bring it in some, so those retaining walls up above don't grow too tall?
I would never want to say it couldn't be done, but I'm not sure the geometry works with the slope of those hills. So that would be a question for the designer, Brad, to understand. The further, as every foot you push it down, the more those retaining walls grow on the sides. Now, how much can they pull those wooden decks in on all three sides would be a question.
I think we could agree that we will not support it as designed. It needs to be pushed down, it needs to get smaller, and if anything, it comes back for us to look at that effort, but you have 25% of this group thinks it's pretty unlikely that it'll work. I'd say you've got a lot of work in front of you to try to sell this, Brad. Would you agree? It's kind of 3 to 1, 2.5 to 1.5.
Yeah, I mean, I can see viability with the project if there are some pretty significant modifications. That's how I'd summarize it.
Just to
Oh, go ahead.
Just to clarify, just procedure, so part of the ADR resolution states that a majority vote of the ADR group is necessary to provide a recommendation to the town council. And then so in that staff report, staff would take that vote count for that recommendation and forward it to the town council. But in this case, it sounds like the ADR's vote is to make recommendations to the landscape architect to amend the plans, either bringing down the court or changing the size or modifying the size or moving the decks so that, one, it's not 16 feet above the finished grade, and also to minimize the retaining walls that would be necessary to lower the court.
Yes.
Is that-
Yes.
Okay, sure.
And I think it's such a complex project that it's not ready for this just to be said, oh, yes, we did that, and to go to town council. I think it needs to come back to us so we can see what the new plan looks like.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense? Does everyone
Yeah,
agree with
I think
that?
makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. We'll see you soon. And the next project is 160 Lagunitas Road, and Stephen has to recuse himself, as he's the architect. So let's start the presentation from staff on that one.
Good evening, ADR members. Tonight, the applicant and owner at 160 Lagunitas is requesting a recommendation to the Town Council for design review. The project proposes to construct a 66 by 33 feet sport court in the front yard of the property. The sport court will be located 25 feet from both the front and side yard setbacks in compliance with the zoning regulation for the R1BA zoning district. The sport court will be made of artificial turf and will have a 10-foot-high glass wall with a thin steel frame. The sport court will also be well screened with tall hedges on all sides. And staff requests that the ADR discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the Town Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And now would the applicant like to present the project? Hi.
Hi, I'm Stephen Sutro. Thank you for hearing this tonight. Alex, you have a deck, I think, that Katie emailed to you.
Correct.
You can go to the next slide, please. This just shows the position of the proposed court relative to the setback, so it's in the buildable area. Eric Blazin is here, and he's, after we talk about the function of the court, the design of the court, he'll talk about the screening and the planting around it. We prepared a lot of information about the sound for this court because we thought we might talk about this evening. So we can skip over that or we'll touch on it briefly, but we'll be prepared to talk about that at council. But this is a padel court. Padel is new to me, haven't heard of it before. Now I'm interested in playing, but it's a soft surface court. It's an astroturf or artificial turf that would be laid over a permeable concrete. So we're not creating an impervious surface with this court. But so it's a softer surface than pickle, and the ball is felt covered, and it's with a racket that is softer than a hard pickle racket. So that's not really. I just want you to understand kind of what they're about, what they're interested in doing here. This sport is growing and kind of is interesting, and so it's about the sound of tennis or something similar to that. But because there are glass walls on the court, a lot of the sound is captured by those glass walls. And there are openings at the sides, so there's leakage at the sides, definitely. But we've done some sound studies, and the decibels erode as you go away from the source of the sound, and the glass captures some of it. And so we conclude, to the best of our ability, and measuring it with the client playing on a different court, that it'll be less than the 55 decibels at the property lines. But if it is not, the client has committed to using a sound barrier that they would place in between the screening and basically around the glass. And there's a wood slat version, there's a green netted version, there are all kinds of things that they make for this. But so I think that's probably enough about the decibels and kind of the intent of and kind of the thought about sound, unless you guys want to talk more about that in a question period. So it's in the buildable area. And it'll be fully screened, we believe, from all sides, including both side neighbors and from the front as you walk or drive or bike along Lagunitas. And so we don't think it's going to affect the people's perception of the lot at all. It will not be lit for night play. It'll have low lighting kind of in the shrubs for navigation around it and stuff, but the intent is not to use it at night, nor will lighting allow for it to be used at night. I think we can click on the next slide, Alex, please. These are differences between pickleball and padel, just because pickle is such a hot issue, and kind of how much sound noise is generated by each and how that sound erodes at distance and so forth. And so we can skip over that and we'll present it to council, unless you guys are interested in question and answer. And this is a diagram that shows what the anticipated decibel level is in a kind of circumference around the court, and most importantly, at the property lines that are adjacent, and how it would, in our estimation and measurement, be less than 55 decibels. You can skip, Alex. These are views, renderings from Lagunitas, and it's hidden from view by the hedges, the tall hedges that are behind the fence line, and by a hedge that stands behind the garage there, and then on the other side by hedges along the property line. So these are disappointing renderings from a illustration standpoint. We're not very exciting in that it's not visible here, but it's important to see that. Next slide, Alex. These are elevations. Eric, do you want to say anything about these? So Eric prepared a planting plan for this, and also there's a slide that shows a sample specimen that they would deploy along the property lines and along the fence line, just to illustrate the height upon planting.
Hi, Eric Blazin, landscape architect. So on the front area, we're proposing to put, and I'll show you a picture of the actual plant that we're going to put in. It's called Laurus nobilis. It's a bay laurel, and we're putting it in as 36-inch box, so it's 12 feet on the get-go, and then it's going to grow even taller. So the other thing that's interesting is, if you look at the section down below, here's the street, and then the Padel court is down here. That's a 5-foot grade change. So it's 5 feet lower already from the street level down. And then it's also, we're not doing any crazy grading because it's flat. So it's a very low impact situation that we're doing. So I'd go to the next visual. I think you can blow out of that. So that's an actual picture of the hedge that we're proposing to plant along the street side. And then we're proposing to plant the same similar ones on the sides, but they're a bit smaller. But that way, people coming on the street will never see this because it's also 5 feet lower than the street side is. So, and it's an evergreen, and you can cook with it too. It's cooking day. So if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you. Do either of you two?
I was just gonna, what spacing for those hedges are you planning?
They'll be touching, actually. So it'll be, I think, I want to say 6 feet. So yeah, we won't have gaps in them.
Okay.
And then it'll grow even taller than that, and then they can set what height they want it at. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Maybe one for Stephen, if I could. Could you maybe give a little more description of this glass? Is glass part of the actual
Yeah,
court
sorry, I
usage?
could have gotten more into that, yeah.
You mentioned it kind of drops down at some point or comes back up at some point? Maybe
Yeah,
just a little more detail on
it's surrounded on the ends and about 40% of the sides. The glass is part of the play, so the court, there's no out of bounds. The court goes all the way to the glass, and the tennis ball kind of, it's a more decompressed or softer tennis ball, is played against the walls and stuff like that. Yeah, and so it's a part of the specification for the glass is part of the sport. The sport also calls for 3 extra feet of height on on top of the glass that they don't want to do for visual reasons. So the real sport specifications ask for you to build a 13-foot tall thing, 10 foot of glass, and then another bit of chain link above that. And it was a cross too big to bear for Melissa, who didn't want that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the glass is just clear?
Yeah.
Unless you add the acoustical panels or something?
The glass is clear, yeah, but right on the other side of the glass will be greenery on 2 sides, and then 2 sides would face the open yard, and then 25 minus 3, about 20 feet away or something would be the hedge that faces the other neighbor. And both neighbors have lend support. All the neighbors have lent support, yeah. But most importantly, the two immediate neighbors have lent support. Yeah, there's the extra thing on top that that Melissa put the kibosh on.
I have a question. If it sits down, are you using any retaining walls to make it sit lower than the road, or that's the natural?
That's the natural grading. So
Okay.
originally, the plan was to have playable lawn or other garden surface that the natural grading comes up about 3 or 4 feet from the house to the street. And so it was going to be graded down, and there's a low retaining wall at kind of the setback line that was planned as part of the garden plan that Eric originally did. And so there's no new grading associated with this, but it just kind of nestles in that spot where the retaining wall was planned. So there's a small seat wall of about 3 feet tall there, or a little bit of slope berm, and then a 1.5 feet or something wall.
Does the glass sit on top of that, or is it it's in front
It's
of it?
inboard in front of, so
Okay.
the wall is about, this high, and then the glass is in front of it. There's a gap, little gap between them because to play against the glass. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you guys have any other questions? Now I'll open it up to the public for public comment, 3 minutes apiece.
No one is online.
Okay, back to us for recommendations.
I'm happy to go. Yeah, I can fully support it as designed. I will make a couple of comments that I think could help maybe folks on the council. This is interesting as far as a use case, because we have the Lagunitas Club right down the street, which is doing tennis awfully in a similar proximity to Lagunitas Road. So it just sort of seems like one and the same. Interesting to have a different surface. Permeable surface, I think, is really a plus here. And the artificial turf surface is very different than a concrete surface or a tennis court surface. So that's kind of nice. But other than that, yeah, within the setbacks, great hedging, great screening, no other comments.
Yeah, I was definitely kind of confused, well, not confused, but trying to understand what the regulations are with like a sports court in the front yard, especially on kind of such a prominent, important street for the town. But based on a few things, including the fact that it's kind of that the natural slope goes down, so it's not like it's 10 feet like above from the road. And the clear plan to put in 12-foot trees spaced tightly, shrubs or trees spaced tightly together. Since the fence that they do have installed is completely transparent. It's like the hog wire fence. So from a design review perspective, I don't think I have much to add. I mean, it would just be kind of concern of like seeing this from the street, and if they are doing everything to reduce that or eliminate that from happening, then I guess I would support it.
I also support it as drawn. It's beautiful. Maybe the conditions of approval are that you just can't see it from the street. And if the noise becomes a problem at some point, you put that extra barrier between the glass and the hedging. And I want to learn how to play that sport. It sounds fun. But no, it's a great project. So I think you've got 3 out of 3. Okay. We have no conceptual advisory design review items. Do we have any new agenda items or anything we need to discuss before we adjourn? Okay, I move to adjourn the meeting. Okay, thanks, everyone.